Say that again? I didn't see me. Just perhaps. I don't know if she's on her way or not. I'm just here. Yeah, I don't think I didn't see her. Here, let me see if I remember. I can text her. Thanks.
Good to go. Is this on Zoom?
Yes.
Good morning. Welcome to Granoramas, Neurology Granoramas. I'm Andrew Cole. I direct a series of industry fellowships, including the fellowship at Biogen. And I'm going to introduce Denis Balaban, who is about to graduate from his 2-year fellowship. Denis received his BS in biomedical engineering at Washington University in St. Louis and his MD at the University of Florida College of Medicine. He completed neurology residency here at MGH and the Advanced General Autoimmune Neurology Fellowship at MGH Harvard Medical School, where he's now an instructor and a member of the MGH Vasculitis Center. His research interests include neurosarcoidosis, vasculitis, multiple sclerosis. He was selected as the Ann B. Young Translational Neuroscience Fellow, where he gained clinical trial design and implementation experience in an industry setting for Biogen. He co-leads a large retrospective study in neurosarcoidosis myelitis and is co-investigating new treatments for optic neuritis. Denis, welcome. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about the experience.
Thank you very much. Right. Make sure everything's set up with the tech. Just bump this a little bit more. There we go. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy to be here, excited to be here. Thank you, Andy, for that introduction. So today I'll talk to you about my experience at the Ann B. Young Translational Neuroscience Fellowship at Biogen. If I can figure out how to advance, there we are. So I'll first discuss just how I came to this fellowship, why I decided to pursue it, what I've been doing at Biogen, some of the lessons that I've learned, and some of my future plans. So first, just starting far back of what even brought me to medicine in the first place. So in college, I really found that I was exploring how important the doctor-patient relationship is. I spent an entire English semester in my argumentation class, basically just writing essays about the importance of active listening, the importance of really being able to connect with patients. And that was really one of my driving forces when it came to applying to medical school. When I was choosing a medical school, I chose the one that actually had a patient in the interview day. So really driving home that from day one, the patient is the main focus of any interaction when it comes to medicine. And in medical school, I continued to pursue that interest, learned as much as I could, and I really enjoyed being the person in my class who studied the hardest, who seemed to be able to know the answer first. And from that sort of base, I was fortunate enough to come to residency at Harvard Med School. And in neurology, as I was going through my rotations on the RDA rotations often, I really found myself gravitating towards patients with very complex diagnoses. And these tended to be the neuroimmunologic, neuroinfectious diagnoses, where it's sort of a smorgasbord to consider. Could this be vasculitis? Could this be some sort of infection in the immunocompromised? Could this be a form fruits of a malignancy? I love being able to think down all of these different pathways. And so after residency, to further pursue these interests, I went to the Advanced General Autoimmune Neurology Fellowship with Dr. Benna and Dr. Retta, and I continue to see and really focused on seeing these complex patients with whom they've probably seen 3 or 4 neurologists already, and they're just looking for someone to help them through their diagnostic and therapeutic journey, looking for someone to stay with them through these very complicated and anxiety-provoking times in their life. And through this, through the Advanced General Autoimmune Neurology Fellowship, we came across many difficulties in knowing how best to care for these patients, because when it comes to the rare and the complex, often there is a dearth of knowledge regarding how to best care for these patients. And so, for example, there's no randomized trials in how to treat any of these disorders because they're just too rare to study. And so we are best left to our clinical experience, the experience of our colleagues. And through this, it made me think about how can I best help my patients, not only by being their doctor, but how can I best help the field in order to better inform the care for these patients. And so in talking with people during my, again, fellowship experience, someone mentioned that there are these industry-sponsored fellowships where you could learn more about clinical trials. And up to this point, most of my research has been focused on retrospective studies, given the rarity of these disorders. And I was really interested in trying to improve my knowledge on how to carry out prospective studies, how to carry out clinical trials. And this seemed to be a great opportunity to be able to learn about this. So, you know, and I found myself very surprised in a way that I was this very sort of clinically oriented person now thinking about pursuing an industry fellowship. Very much out of my comfort zone, very much out of my area of knowledge and experience and expertise. But I decided, you know, this could be an opportunity for my growth. Growth is always, to an extent, scary and uncomfortable. And I felt a little bit of that, and I thought that was probably a good thing overall. So I decided to apply to the fellowship, and then here I am. So what have I been doing at Biogen? So it's a 2-year fellowship for those who don't know. And in the first year, I was given one project to start off. And this is a project that was basically just an idea at the company. There was not a lot of money invested into this yet. It was a small team that I was part of. And you might be wondering, okay, well, what was this? And I wish I could tell you. But in short, it was what I thought a very interesting and exciting idea, one that I have not seen other MS-focused companies exploring. I was very excited to be a part of this, this project. And so it started off with me on this, what we call sprint team. Essentially, small focus group, all dedicated to just trying to advance and gather as much knowledge about the topic as humanly possible in a short amount of time. And through a lot of this work, we presented our findings to leadership in the company. We sort of socialized the idea among higher ups in the company to get them interested and on board. And with this, they said, okay, we will grant you more funding. We will grant you more resources, and we'll talk about how that will look. And so they made a hub, is what it's called. So Sprint Team to Hub. And through the hub discussions in that first year, there was talks about trying to get to a point where we could organize maybe a phase 1B in MS regarding this topic. So that was one of the things that I was doing. Later on in the year, I was also put on another project. And this was for a molecule that was already in phase 1. And they were planning to try to bring it to a phase 2 or a phase 3. And I was on one of the teams to help try to plan for this. And so the way I contributed to this was discussing my clinical perspective in how this could be done safely. I basically gave a presentation over 2 days on the relevant topics here, and it helped further discussions and planning on how to bring this forward. I discussed with the safety teams about some of the relevant topics as well. And I also looked at different biomarkers for how to assess for either efficacy or safety in this. Again, I'm being very vague purposefully because, again, this is confidential. And then lastly, as part of the first year, Biogen includes some didactic courses, which I found very helpful. The first was from the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Medicine. And this was a week-long immersive course that lasted the whole day, where they talk about what goes into bringing a molecule to market. So they start off with like basic pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. They talk about all the different phase 1 studies that need to be performed, the safety testing, the toxicology testing, and all the regulations that are necessary between the US, the UK, Japan, EU, about what is necessary. They even then they go to the phase 2 stages, the phase 3 stages, and then sort of the phase 4 life cycle management, as they like to deem it, where once the drug is on the market, how does the long term look for that drug? What do you do when it comes off patent? What do you do when generics companies start to come in to the landscape? So it was a very broad but also somewhat deep course, mainly focusing on the regulations and some of the strategy aspect as well. The second didactic course, well, before I go to that, I love this course because the people who administered it were seasoned experts when it came to running clinical trials. One was from the UK. I think she'd been a part of like 20 or 50 drugs that have come to market or have been tested, and she would share all of these illuminating stories about her experiences. So it was a great opportunity. So the second course was a presentation skills course, where essentially an expert on how to give presentations gave a very good presentation on how to do this. And we had the opportunity to practice, and I've since changed how I deliver presentations thanks to this, and I find it far more effective. And in other presentations and working with my colleagues, I also try to transfer some of the knowledge that I learned so that we can all be a bit more effective in how we speak. So then year 2 comes around. And this year 2, I learned a bit more about some of the tumults that can occur in the industry setting. So this early stage project that I was very excited about, so like maybe we're going to do a phase 1B. Well, then we got a new CEO in the company. And as you might know, there were a lot of layoffs that occurred at Biogen over the last year. And unfortunately, the project was placed on hold indefinitely because it was no longer a part of the company's overall strategy. So that was a bit disappointing, but we were able to continue our work on this, the phase 2/3 planning for this other MS molecule. And so again, I helped the team with reviewing mechanisms for its specific indication, which led to, as a team presenting to leadership. And the plan was very well received by leadership, and it was deemed, and once the phase 1 completed, it was deemed as a go as opposed to a no-go to continue discussions regarding further trials for this. So that was very exciting. And then more recently, I was selected by the company to start leading 2 study management teams for different molecules in their portfolio. So what does this mean, or an SMT? So essentially, with an SMT, what they do day to day is make sure that everything with the trial is going smoothly in terms of are the centers sticking to the protocol. If they're unsure, they come and ask me, we go over the protocol, making sure that everything is staying up to date with the paperwork, regulatory agencies, making sure that everything, all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. So I have been working with lot of different people in this role. So clinical research organizations, stats, safety, regulatory, protocol questions, and then yeah, even some regulatory agencies are like, no, we need these paperwork. We have questions about the protocol here that we want to bring up, even though the protocol hasn't changed for the last 2-3 years, and now we have questions again. So been learning a lot in this role. So and because of all of these different things that I've been doing at the company, I've had exposure to so many different people with all sorts of expertise. You can see a non-exhaustive list here, but it was a really wonderful opportunity to be able to see how there's so many different people in the company dedicated towards the goal of bringing something to market safely. So just a few selected lessons that I've learned in this process, in the planning process. One is choosing endpoints very carefully. For example, how do we make sure that we're choosing endpoints that are important to patients? So for example, there have been endpoints historically in certain diseases and trials that have been done that seemed like good markers initially, but now that we've learned more, actually it's not as relevant as we thought they were. However, because those markers have been done historically, and the FDA is a very large organization that tends to focus on what's been done historically, when trying to bring new endpoints, that can be a tricky conversation. That can be, you have to be able to really support your choices for endpoints. So trying to navigate those sorts of discussions and planning is very important, because you want to make sure that you are bringing a trial that will be able to measure what is important to patients at the end of the day. Second is making sure that if you're able to in the trial have exploratory endpoints, where if you're able in this trial to say, okay, these seems like positive markers, again, maybe not powered, maybe not going to be on the label, but if that sets you up in the future to, in a later trial, be able to use those more effectively, that's something to think about for the long term as well. And then making sure that the endpoints are, again, going to fly well with any regulatory agency. So that brings me to planning with regulatory and safety in mind. So how do you want to, so planning the trial to make sure that the patient population selection, making sure that your drug regimen, making sure that the dosing schedule, all is going to make, one, biological sense, but two, one that will not raise any red flags with either regulatory agencies or safety agencies in mind. So thinking of those things from the get-go, planning for them, and if you think that there's going to be some snags, making sure that you are prepared and you can back up your decisions well. Third, as anyone in clinical trials knows, or prospective studies knows, it's so important to talk to your statisticians early on. They are the people who are key in powering your study, making sure that your design makes mathematical sense, so that you know how many patients you need to include and who those patients are. Timing is also so important. I had spoken with someone who actually used to be at Harvard, who's now at Biogen, who had worked in medical affairs. And in her role in medical affairs, she would often review ideas brought by academic clinicians or other clinicians saying, hey, I want to work with Biogen to run this idea or that idea. And she would review those proposals. And since it's something that I've thought about in my future career, like, okay, well, how do you make decisions on these? How do you delineate which would go forward and which would not? And she says, Dennis, it's so hard because a lot of these are really good ideas sometimes. But sometimes these ideas are just not the right time, not the right fit for us. And I have to say no to them because they're not part of our overall strategy. It doesn't mean that they're bad ideas. And I'm like, okay, that's very good. That's helpful information. Much like how I'm sure many in the audience know, when submitting grants, you get those 9 rejections and the 10th one goes. Just because those rejections are there doesn't mean that it's a bad grant or a bad idea. Maybe it just wasn't the right one for that agency or that body. So that was a bit of, it gave a bit of hope as well. And then fostering your team. With all the different balls in the air when it comes to clinical trials and all the people who need to be a part of making decisions, it's so important when leading a team to make sure that you have good relationships with everybody there, to make sure that the lines of communication are open, making sure that everyone knows who is doing what their roles are, and making sure that you're checking in with people regularly. So I've seen very good examples of that happening with some of my team leaders at Biogen. So it was good to learn from their example. And then I would say that a lot of the other important lessons that I've learned, more so than like being on the team and like learning about how they conduct or how like the nitty gritty or the, you know, okay, we need to do this in order for this regulatory. There's just an informal curriculum, I would say, just the culture of industry that was helpful to see, because there are differences when it comes to how they do things and how things are done in academia. One of the things that I had learned, again, was just like, what's in a pharmaceutical company? How does that operate? How does that work? And like, what's pharmacovigilance mean? What is? And so I was able to learn what the different departments and divisions of a company are, so that in the future, if I'm you know, working with a company, I'll know like who, or at least what department is necessary to contact, so that we can talk and get the necessary information. And it is just a very helpful thing to know how that works. Talk to everyone. So in making, in trying to make decisions of how to move forward, people, like during discussions, people would often say, well, we don't know that question actually when it comes to who's going to be using this drug the most, or what does the landscape look like, or what is that mechanism, how does this mechanism actually work? And I found that, you know, our team leaders would say, okay, let's make sure we loop in our basic scientists, let's make sure we loop in our market folks, let's make sure we loop in our safety and our regulatory. Like they had, if there was a question, there was some expert that they could draw on to get the best opinion and the best information possible. And making sure that you're not having your blinders on and that you are aware of the different things available in your field and landscape to draw on everyone's expertise so that the best decision is made. Double and triple check. So I found that in some of the teams that I was on, it seemed like with trying to make a decision, there were times where I personally thought like, okay, the decision is made. And then meeting or two later, it's like, wait, we're talking about the same thing again? Why is that? I thought we already decided this. I thought that that's the same question from like 2 months ago. And it seemed kind of frustrating and repetitive and at first, and partially it was. But also there was a method to that madness, which was to make sure that we are still okay with the decision that we made, to make sure that we're still confident about that. Did we learn something new in the interim that changes our minds, changes our tactic? So revisiting and reevaluating is important here as well. This was something that I encountered early on, and I wasn't sure exactly how to put it aside from this, but essentially it was something I encountered where I had contributed to a presentation or two that went to leadership. And my team leader was the main one who was presenting, and I was like, oh, my name's not on that slide, or my name's like, I'm like, what's with that? Because in academia, I'm very used to like, everyone's like, it's delineated who did what very specifically. And he was like, no, we worked as a team. We all had our hands on the ball on this. Everyone's name is at the first or second slide with like their functions. And then I present the work as the team leader. And it's known that everyone had their hand on the ball on this. It was like, what matters less is exactly who did what. What matters more is that we all as a team have made a good plan, one that is going to be carried forward and have the confidence in our leadership so that we can start getting things done. I was like, okay, that's a difference. And there's some merit to that too. So I found that interesting. And lastly was considering the micro and the macro. So in the teams that I was on, I loved the different shifts in focus that occurred in our discussions. So one day we might be talking about, okay, let's focus on how certain we are that the drug that we're doing is doing this exact mechanism as well as these other ones. And maybe it can also apply to this other mechanism that we are interested in. Let's have a deep dive discussion into these topics. And then a few weeks later, we'll also be talking about how, well, if we don't have this drug brought to market by 2030, throwing a random number out there, then this other drug will come off patent and that'll be generic and everyone will be using that. And then our drug will not matter so much anymore and that will hurt our market share. It's like, oh, wow. So we can have discussions going from the very nitty gritty of basic science all the way to just considering the landscape of the disease as a whole and how it's treated. That is something that in my day-to-day as a clinician, I do not encounter. Because as a clinician day-to-day is I have patients in front of me. I'm going to be focusing on them. I'm trying to make a diagnosis. I'm going to go to literature if I need to, and then come up with a treatment plan. It's not talking about the basic. It's not talking about the landscape of the disease or the trajectory of that. So I really loved being able to consider these things that I didn't consider on a day-to-day. So yeah, and change in mindset, exactly what I was talking about. I feel like, before this fellowship, I sort of had blinders on anyway. Not bad, I mean, it's always, like, the patient is always the focus, but you can also work for the patient in many different ways I've found. It's not solely the doctor-patient relationship. It is also important to consider these other avenues to help the patient. And so that's sort of how I felt. It sort of opened up what medicine means for me and how I can contribute. So this actually led to, I'll talk about this later, but it led to me, working with Michael Levy, Anastasia Vishnevetsky, Giovanna Manzano on starting a trial in optic neuritis, which prior to this fellowship, I'm not sure I would have had the confidence or the state of mind to do. This fellowship allowed me to no, I can do this. This is important. I need to be on this, and because I have something to contribute. And so that was a huge thing that the fellowship helped me with. So the other thing that the fellowship helped me with was just knowing the strengths and the differences between industry and academia. So industry, they have a lot of resources, salaries better, oftentimes. They have someone for every sort of function you can imagine. And with that, with that amount of resources, they have such a good trial apparatus in place at all times. If you need a clinical trial done, industry has the ability and the techniques and the resources to get it done, and quickly, relatively speaking. Trials take a few years in planning, but relatively quickly. And as someone who is starting out in an assistant medical director role or a medical director role, they can affect change on a fairly large scale rather quickly because of that. I had colleagues who were like, okay, well, what I worked on today was trying to make sure that our drug is approved in China so that the entire country of China has access to this drug. Wow, that's on a national scale. That's an international scale. That's impressive. And you can get that done as a medical director. The other thing, industry, is that you don't have prior auths, you have your weekends. There's benefits to being in industry if that's not something that is that you want to do. So there are certain strengths about being in industry. Being in academia, though, has a lot of strengths as well. So I'm going to actually start with the second to bottom, which is you are able to pick your projects for the most part. In industry, they, oftentimes leadership saying, okay, we need you to work on this because that is our strategic goal and you shall do this. I don't have a lot of choice necessarily. If you're, for example, I'm interested in all these rare stuff, that's not going to make a lot of money. There's not a lot of people who it affects. That's not going to be the main focus. So the benefit of academia is I have the freedom and ability to be able to research those things and pick my projects. The other thing is with academia is I find it a little less risk averse. A phrase that you'll often hear in industry is the word de-risk. How do we de-risk this drug? How do we de-risk this safety concern? How do we de-risk this indication for this drug? Because industry wants to make sure that they are not going to be placing a bet on a trial or a drug without a good probability of a positive outcome for them. Oftentimes I've heard of people saying, okay, well, let's wait on the readout from this company that's doing sort of what we're interested in doing, and pending those results, we will decide to move forward with this or not. Whereas in academia, there is not that incentive to need to make a profit. That does not exist. It's about generating knowledge, generating information, being able to contribute to the field. So academia is able to conduct trials and projects that industry might necessarily be interested in. With the layoffs that happened at Biogen, I found that people were laid off like that when that was occurring. There was somebody who worked there for 28 years, actually designed a molecule that we were working to bring to further trials, and got laid off and was told on a Friday morning and was gone by Friday afternoon. No celebration, no nothing, just a box and her and leaving. She is brilliant, and I'm sure she is landing on her feet. But it felt fairly unceremonious, and we felt her absence. I've never heard of such a thing happening in academia. At least the silver lining of that is industry knows that when layoffs happen, it's not because someone did a bad job, usually. It's just that strategies changed, and a lot of other companies are like, oh, we need to snatch that person up. And so that's why I'm pretty confident she landed on her feet. But academia, if you're wanting to stay in the same place, if you're wanting to remain where you are, you have that option pretty darn well. Teaching, I mean, no matter what job you have, you're always going to be teaching someone, I think. There's always a necessary passing down of knowledge. But in academia, it's more of a mission. We are here to educate the new generation of doctors. We are here to educate our patients. We're here to educate each other. That is baked in, and I love that. And then the most important thing that allows all of these things, the reason why we're all here, are the patients. We are here for them. We are taking care of them, and all that we do is for them. Industry does not, they rely on us, they rely on physicians to be able to recruit, to be able to do what they do. So that's a huge strength that academia has. But what do they have a lot in common. Both have very smart, motivated people. I was so impressed with the people that I worked with at Biogen, very knowledgeable when it came to their areas of expertise. Lots of good scientific rigor. There's mentorship available in both. My team leaders at Biogen, I was meeting with them every week, which is great. We're also busy in academia. I don't think that happens usually, but I learned a lot from them and how they led their teams. But you're able to do trials in both industry and academia, but sometimes, depending on the sort of trial, might be easier in one versus the other. And both offer hope to patients, I think. We have so many good examples at MGH of new medicines, new therapies that no one has been able to have before. I think of Florian Eichler as a great example of that with gene therapies and leukodystrophies. In industry, having a new medication out there, another choice, a new mechanism of action, being able to offer these different things. That can offer a lot of hope for patients with disease as well. So throughout the 2 years, people have asked me, wait, so after all of these things, you made this sound so positive, Dennis. How are you staying? You're staying in academia? Yes, I am. So why am I staying in academia? Well, first off, it was never my plan to leave. I came into this fellowship wanting to learn more about clinical trials. I was curious about how industry works. It's not something I was ever exposed to. So yeah, it was never the goal to go to industry for me. My heart, my core as a physician is caring for the patient, listening to them, alleviating their anxiety, offering them a pathway of hope. That is who I am as a physician. And that has always been my drive. Yeah, in industry, you can see patients sometimes. It's a fraction of what you're able to do in academia. You often don't have that longitudinal capacity as well. And I would sorely miss that going to industry. So another reason I'm staying. To me, doctor means teacher. I find that of the utmost importance and value in being able to carry that next generation forward, to be able to inspire, to be able to provide or aspire to provide an example for students, residents, learners, anyone to continue forward. And I'm a naturally curious person. I have my interests. I have the things that I spend my afternoons and evenings thinking about and wanting to know more. And I want to be able to have the agency to carry those forward. And I don't want someone else telling me, no, you're actually going to do this dance. So I like that in academia. Maybe also consider why have others joined industry? For some, it's a better personal fit, and that's great. I want anybody who thinks that industry will better serve their goals, whatever those may be, then go, great. We want you to have, I want someone to have or feel like they have the ability to run at full speed towards whatever goal they want. And I've often found that many are not sure or have not heard of or did not recognize industry as a viable career path or an opportunity. I think that, and I know some would probably feel that, well, we want people to stay in academia, and so we shouldn't help them. I don't think, much like, I was thinking of this analogy yesterday, it's not my favorite analogy, but I'm still gonna make it. We learn in medical school that talking to someone about, suicide, for example, doesn't make them commit suicide. Talking to people about industry doesn't make them go into industry. If someone goes to industry, they were going to go anyway. But it allows them to know what's the landscape, I think. It allows them to understand what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses in both. So I think we could probably do a better job at educating people about what it means to be in industry and what it means to be in academia. Now, there are some people, so some of my predecessors in the fellowship, for example, I think they came to the fellowship with the goal in mind to go to industry. That was their path. They were going to do that anyway, with or without. There are some people who I think would probably enjoy being in academia, but there might be some things that they found difficult that allowed them or encouraged them to switch tacks that they might necessarily have thought about, even knowing about industry. And I think these are areas in which academia as a whole could potentially improve and do better. So industry, flush with resources, and they are able to have so much support, both for research, admin, and I think that this is an area that MGH already knows of and is putting a lot of work and effort to improve. So I'm really happy to see some of that. And then just, patient care, we work in a broken system in the US. Insurance, prior auths, people not getting the medications that they need to, people not having the access that they need to, people having to wait a year to see a specialist sometimes. That weighs on the soul. It's hard. And it dispirits. And I think some people can reach a point where that becomes too much. And I think that's something that as a society, as a government, as an institution, we can all try and do better. So these are areas that I think MGH is also working forward and making improvements on, which I'm happy to see. We have the Frigoletto Committee, we have the new prior authorization initiative, the NOVA initiative that has certainly helped me with some of my prior auths. So I'm happy to see that MGH is an institution in which it is trying to improve and alleviate some of these issues. In preparing this talk, I was also curious what's out there in the literature for people who are curious. And I found this article for those interested in learning more about what industry is like. This is written by some folks from Johnson & Johnson, and after reading it, they gave a pretty accurate summary of things that physicians are able to do in industry. So what am I planning on doing in the future? So as I mentioned before, I'm working with Anastasia Vishnevetsky, Michael Levy, Giovanna Manzano on an investigator-initiated trial in optic neuritis, working with Arginex. I'm working with Giovanna Manzano, who on going to be the largest multi-center retrospective cohort in neurosarcoid myelitis. Shamik, I'm sorry, Giovanna Manzano and Shamik and Michael Levy, and a lot of people working on this, and Bart College. So we're all working on this for the neurosarcoid myelitis cohort. And then one project that I'm also interested in is trying to measure disability in sarcoidosis as a disease, have that be a multidisciplinary project. So in closing, the ABY Fellowship with Biogen provides valuable clinical trial experience, exposure to industry functions and culture, network expansion, and can offer a change in mindset. I'm always happy to talk to anybody who is curious about industry-sponsored fellowships, about my experiences in industry. Thank you for your interest in those who have already contacted me about what my experience was like. Always happy to chat more. And I promised for honest and candid answers. I'd like to acknowledge for this opportunity, Dr. Sokovich and Dr. Cole for having this fellowship in the first place, for the mentorship provided by Dr. Levy and Dr. Bhattacharya, and the invaluable expertise, talent, and guidance from my colleagues, Dr. Manzano and Dr. Vishnevetsky, and of course the mentorship by Dr. Retta and Dr. Venna. I'd also like to thank the people at Biogen who allowed for an excellent experience for me, Dr. Toby Ferguson, Natalie Franchemont, and Diana Gallagher, as well as Dr. Hadi Magzi, Megan Karimian, Matt Scaramosa, and Jerome Hanna, who have been excellent project leaders. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions. Yeah.
So I had a question about comments about, for example, how your sorry.
Sure.
You gave a couple of comments about how things change for us, how sort of in a way they learn from the person.
Yeah.
Exciting expense reduction.
Yep.
Side of innovation, both thinking on the side of industry and also on the side of academia and whatever gets funded as well.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Science, something happens in industry as well.
Yep.
And I think the example of
Yep.
last 2 years has been a big shift since I get solar information. I don't argue with the point that focus on something and all the bats are on the same thing.
Yep.
All the pharmaceutical companies are in the same direction. So we're seeing both sides. That's happening in this now. Really seeing mechanisms of action.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think it goes to show more about human nature than an industry versus academia issue. You know, I think people, and this goes for like so many different things as well, stock market included, where people see someone running in one direction and then it's like, oh, I should probably run too. Oh, that person's running, I should probably run too. And then you have a stampede of people going towards a single direction. I think that what would be required to prevent something like that is either having leadership with enough foresight to know that, yes, this seems to be an important issue, but it does not mean that these other areas are no longer important. I think that requires foresight from leadership in industry, leadership in funding agencies. You know, people change, both intra-individual and just people have different roles and they leave and other people come. Could there be some way to have a rule where you know, we only allow certain number of dollars going to this thing that everyone seems super interested in, but reserving enough so that we can continue funding these other projects that we know are still important. I think I think it's a human nature thing, not an industry academia thing.
Since nice presentation journey over the last 2 years. Florida when you showed the two diagrams, right, was characteristic of the industry and was characteristic of academia. Find this fellowship a way to increase the size of the middle market, right, the intersection there. So we also talk about work-life balance and give an example of microaggressions here and macroaggressions on the other side, losing your job after many years.
Yeah.
But how in your faculty role here, you see areas of approach of industry that benefit.
And benefiting academia in terms of like retention, in terms of better work-life balance, or just in general? In terms of getting projects done. I would say that MGH has a lot of resources, especially compared to other institutions. I think trying to make sure that people are aware of all the resources to begin with, how to how to obtain those resources and use them, how to make sure that any barriers are lower in getting those, and whether that is people, whether that's you know, certain functions like statistics, whether that's people who are very knowledgeable when it comes to regulatory. I think those are some of the things that I identify. I think also just being able to teach people who are new at this how to lead teams, especially these cross-functional teams, effectively. That is a skill in and of itself. One that I still need to work on, honestly. I think that offering you know, didactics, examples, like coaching on how to get those and how to develop those skills is of vital importance. Because sometimes it's just tough to organize. I mean, one of the nice things about academia is you can do so many different things. You can be seeing patients one day, you could be talking to you know, a governmental agency the next, you could be teaching residents the next. But it also, that ability to do many things and wear many hats also comes with difficulties in organization. And fitting 24 hours, more than 24 hours into a single day. So I think offering ways to make sure that people are able to keep things on track, and whether that's making sure that people are managing their time better, making sure that people have enough support to get some of the other sort of nitty-gritty things done, and so that people can focus on a bigger picture. I think those things might be helpful.
I just want to add to what we said. There are cultural similarities in the organization, but there are also cultural differences. In my mind, this mission statement is pretty much the same across the board. To develop new therapeutics, bring them to patients.
Yep.
Mission statement of MGH is at least 5 paragraphs. I couldn't recite it or even get all paragraphs, but it goes on. And it's all very intentional. It's just measurable, straightforward, so that focus, bringing, this is what we're doing. And we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
There's a difference between first missions and individual. So this, there are many missions.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say something that also, as I gave you your picture, or your vision of this, just because Biogen says that early stage compound is no longer supposed to be in that compound.
Yeah.
And one of the amazing things about Boston is the diversity of biotech, small biotech, large biotech, small pharma, large pharma. There's a niche somewhere. Someone will say that. Someone will take that and try to figure it out. There are places. And I think the point you should raise is to the Me Too treatments. Where do the good ideas come from?
Yes.
Some of them come from the small, vision, idea basis, so we're going to try to figure out and tag. So all these different organizations sort of create places where lots of real innovation. And rapidly became clear that many people started with this. Would have happened if they stopped right. So, there's a lot of because they're making progress in we make a big change.
Yeah, I fully agree with all of that. I was going to say one other thing. Marcella, one of the things that I had thought about after your question as well is that when it comes to industry, that I think the institutional memory and that machinery of how to conduct trials is also something that is quite helpful. There's people who have been doing this for 10, 20 years, and they can be brought onto a team on a guidance role, advisory role, and that is often very valuable experience. Sometimes when in academia, I feel like for some, it might feel like reinventing the wheel again and again and again when someone new is trying to get into this. I think making sure that there's strong mentorship that is available to guide early faculty or people who are just new at this. I think that's of vital importance as well. Got a question here from Charles Jennings. Thanks for a great presentation. Your background is clinical. Any thoughts on how the pros and cons of industry are similar or different for non-clinical PhD researchers? Oof, that is a good question. I think that I wish I could comment more directly, given that I don't have a PhD and I don't know exactly everything of the experience of graduate school or what being a PhD is like. I would say that there are certainly similarities. I'm sure there are some more nuanced differences when it comes to the thought of going into industry for a PhD. I think that some of the things in which that you talked about, Becky, with getting ideas funded, I think that's where a lot of it comes down to, or it can come down to. In talking with some people who I know who used to be in academia and have gone to industry, at least one of them has said, yeah, when I was enjoying my work, but I got contacted by one of my old mentors who went to industry, and they told me, yeah, what you're doing sounds exactly like what we're doing, but you just don't have the resources that we do. Come over and be with us. And after evaluating it, they said, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then they went, and they're really happy, and they're doing the work that they wanted to do, and they're thriving. So I think, again, when it comes, I think it sort of comes down to the ability to get the work done that you want, and where's the best place for that person to get it done. That's probably the best answer I can give without having a PhD myself. Thank you for the question. Thanks, all.